The black Mercedes stopped in front of the old house at exactly 11 in the morning. Richard Hale stepped out without looking up. He had not been here in 8 years. He did not plan to stay long. His phone buzzed. The lawyer. "Mr. Hale, the buyer confirmed 5 o'clock. Should I come earlier?" "No need. I'm just checking one last time." He walked toward the front door. The key still fit. The lock still turned. But when he stepped inside, something was wrong. The smell of fresh coffee, a cup on the table, still warm, and by the door a pair of children's shoes. Small, worn at the heels, placed neatly, like someone lived here. Richard stood still. He pulled out his phone and called property management. "Who authorized someone to live in my house? If this story already feels familiar, you're not alone. Many of us carry houses we never went back to. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from today." The property manager stammered on the other end of the line. Something about old arrangements. A long-term tenant agreement signed years ago through a third party. The name on file was not familiar. "I don't care about the paperwork," Richard said. "Get them out. Before 5 o'clock. I'm selling this house today." He hung up and stood in the middle of the living room. The furniture was old, a sofa with fabric covering the worn spots. Bills stacked on the coffee table electric. Water, medical. Someone had been living here carefully, quietly, for a long time. His jaw tightened. This was his house. His name on the deed. His decision to sell, whoever these people were. They had no right to be here without his knowledge. A sound from upstairs. Footsteps. Light. Slow. Someone was coming down. Richard turned toward the staircase, shoulders squared. He was ready to deal with whoever had been living in his property all these years. The door at the top of the stairs opened. A woman appeared. Short hair, thinner than she should be. She stopped on the third step, one hand on the railing. Richard's breath left him. He knew that face. He had looked at that face every day for 3 years. He had buried that face 8 years ago. Clara. She did not move, neither did he. The silence stretched until the air itself felt thick, until the old house seemed to hold its breath with them. She spoke first, one word. "Richard." His mouth opened, but nothing came out. His throat had closed. His hands, which had been so steady on the phone a moment ago, were shaking. "You're dead," he said. The words sounded wrong, stupid, but they were all he had. "I saw the certificate. I attended your funeral. You're dead." Clara stayed on the stairs. Her face gave nothing away. "You saw what they wanted you to see." Richard took a step forward. "Who wanted... What are you..." He stopped, tried to breathe. "Explain." Now. But Clara did not explain. She looked at him with something older than anger, older than sadness. "Why are you here, Richard?" "I'm selling the house. The buyer comes at 5. You're selling it." Not a question. Her voice flat. "You're throwing us out." "Us?" The word hit him like cold water. Before he could ask, a small figure appeared behind Clara, a child, 7 years old, dark hair, and eyes. Richard saw his own eyes looking back at him. The child did not move. She stood behind Clara, one small hand gripping the fabric of her mother's dress. Her eyes stayed fixed on Richard, not with fear, not with curiosity, just watching, measuring. Richard could not look away from those eyes. His eyes. The same shape, the same dark color, the same way they narrowed slightly when uncertain. His chest felt tight. His hands hung at his sides, useless. "How old?" he said. His voice came out rough. "How old is she?" Clara's hand moved to the child's shoulder, protective. 7. 7. The number hit him somewhere below the ribs. 7 years. Clara had been pregnant when she disappeared, when he thought she died, when he stood at her funeral and watched an empty casket lowered into the ground. "She was inside you," he said. When I thought—" He could not finish. The words tangled in his throat. Clara said nothing. She did not need to. Richard took a step forward. Instinct. He wanted to see the child closer, wanted to understand what he was looking at. His daughter. The word felt foreign. Impossible. The girl stepped back. Her grip on Clara's dress tightened. She pressed herself against her mother's leg, making herself smaller. Richard stopped. "It's okay," he said, his voice too loud in the quiet house. "I'm not going to— Lily." Clara's voice cut through. Gentle, but firm. "Go to your room, sweetheart." The child— Lily did not move immediately. She looked up at her mother, then back at Richard. Something passed across her face, a question she did not ask out loud. Then she turned and walked up the stairs. Her footsteps were soft, careful. She knew which boards creaked and avoided them. When she was gone, Richard let out a breath he did not know he had been holding. "She doesn't know me," he said. "No. She's never had a father." Clara's jaw tightened. "No, she hasn't." The words landed heavy. Richard looked around the room again. Really looked this time. The thin blanket on the sofa, the stack of envelopes on the table bills, most of them with red stamps, a few toys in the corner, old but clean, arranged with care. This was not just a house someone was using. This was a home. A poor one. A careful one. And he had been ready to throw them out without a second thought. "Mama," Lily's voice floated down from upstairs, small, quiet. But Richard heard every word clearly in the silence. "Is that man going to make you cry?" The question hung in the air. Richard heard Clara's footsteps going up, heard her soft voice telling Lily everything was fine, heard the creak of a door closing. He stood alone in the living room. His hands were still shaking. He shoved them into his pockets and forced himself to breathe. In, out, slower. A child had just asked if he would make her mother cry. A child who had seen enough tears to know that question mattered. Clara came back down the stairs. Her face was composed now, closed off. She walked past him into the small kitchen and turned on the faucet, filling a glass with water. She did not offer him one. "You want to know what happened," she said, not a question. "Yes." She drank the water slowly, set the glass down, turned to face him. "How have you been living?" Richard asked. The question came out before he could stop it. He gestured at the room, the thin curtains, the peeling paint near the ceiling. "How long has it been like this?" Clara leaned against the counter. 8 years. Doing what? Cleaning houses, washing clothes, whatever I could find that let me work while Lily was in school or bring her with me when she was small. She said it simply, without self-pity, just facts. There were times we didn't have enough, times I didn't eat so she could— Richard's stomach turned. "The medical bill's on the table," he said. "Who was sick?" Clara's expression flickered, just for a second. "Lily. 2 winters ago. Pneumonia. It got bad before I could afford to take her to the hospital." She paused. "She almost didn't make it." The room tilted slightly. Richard put a hand on the back of a chair to steady himself. His daughter, a daughter he did not know existed, had almost died in this house, while he lived in a penthouse downtown, ate at restaurants where a single meal cost more than the stack of bills on that table. "Why didn't you find me?" The words came out harsh. "Why didn't you come to my office, call anything?" Clara looked at him for a long moment. "I tried that once, went to your building downtown. Security stopped me at the desk. They said you had given orders no one gets through without an appointment. No exceptions." Richard opened his mouth, then closed it. He had given that order years ago. He just never thought Clara walked to a drawer near the window and pulled out a thick stack of envelopes, held together with a rubber band. She set them on the table between them. "So I wrote, instead—" Richard stared at the envelopes. He recognized Clara's handwriting on the front, his address, his name. Every single one had been stamped and returned. The red ink read, "Refused by recipient." Richard picked up the top envelope, turned it over. The handwriting on the refusal stamp was neat, precise. It was not his handwriting. "I didn't do this," he said. "I know," Clara said quietly. "I figured that out eventually. Someone else did." Richard's mind raced. Someone with access to his mail. Someone who could intercept letters before he ever saw them. Someone who had the authority to refuse delivery on his behalf. Only one person had that kind of access 8 years ago. His hand tightened on the envelope until the paper crumpled. "My mother." Richard's fingers trembled as he opened the first envelope. The paper inside was yellowed, the creases soft from years of folding and unfolding. Clara's handwriting filled the page. He read the first line and stopped. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need you to know I'm carrying your child." His throat closed. He turned to the next letter, then the next. "The baby is healthy. A girl. I named her Lily. She has your eyes. Sometimes she looks toward the door like she's waiting for someone. She doesn't know who. Please, Richard, just let me explain what happened. Just once. I don't need your money. I just need you to know she exists." The letters spanned 2 years, 53 of them, one every week, sometimes more. Every single one returned with that same red stamp. Richard set them down. His hands would not stop shaking. "Who told you I didn't want you?" His voice sounded foreign to his own ears. "Who said I refused to see you?" Clara crossed her arms. Not defensive, protective, like she was holding herself together. "Your mother came to see me, 3 weeks after you thought I died. She knew you were alive. She arranged it." The words landed like a blow to the chest. Richard gripped the edge of the table. "She came to the apartment where I was staying after I left the hospital." Clara continued. Her voice stayed flat, controlled, like she had told this story to herself too many times to feel it anymore. "She had money, a lot of it. She told me to take it and disappear. She said you didn't want me, didn't want the baby, that I was an embarrassment to the family name." Richard's jaw clenched so tight his teeth ached. "I refused the money." Clara uncrossed her arms. Her hands found the edge of the counter behind her. "So she made threats, said if I didn't leave quietly, she would make sure I lost everything. My job, my reputation, any chance of ever working again in this city." A pause. "I was 26, pregnant, alone. I didn't know what else to do, so I left. And the death certificate, the funeral. I don't know how she managed it. Connections, money. I never asked." Clara looked at him directly now, her eyes steady. "I didn't believe her at first, that you didn't want me. That's why I wrote. Every week for 2 years, I kept thinking maybe one letter would get through. Maybe you'd come." Richard felt something cracking inside his chest. A wall he didn't know was there. "I never got them. I never knew. I figured that out eventually." Clara's voice softened, just slightly. "The handwriting on the refusal stamps, it wasn't yours. It took me a long time to understand what that meant. That someone else was making sure you never saw them." Richard pulled out his phone, dialed his mother's number. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Voicemail. He called again. Same result. He looked at the clock on the kitchen wall, 1:47 p.m. The buyer would arrive in just over 3 hours. "I need to see her," Richard said. "I need to hear her say it to my face." Clara did not try to stop him. She just stood there, arms at her sides, watching him move toward the door. "Richard!" He stopped, hand on the doorknob. "Whatever she tells you," Clara said quietly, "it won't change the last 8 years. It won't give Lily her father back. It won't give me back the time I spent wondering if you ever loved me at all." Richard could not find words to answer. He opened the door and walked out into the afternoon light. The drive to his mother's house took 20 minutes. Richard did not remember most of it. He parked in the circular driveway, behind the stone fountain that had cost more than most people's yearly salary. The house rose before him, white columns, manicured hedges, windows that reflected nothing but gray sky. He had grown up here. He had never noticed how cold it looked. The front door opened before he reached it. His mother stood in the entrance, dressed in cream-colored silk, a string of pearls at her throat. Her silver hair was perfect. Her posture was perfect. Everything about Eleanor Whitman was always perfect. "Richard," she did not seem surprised. "I wondered when you'd come." He walked past her into the foyer. The marble floors echoed under his shoes. The chandelier above cast fractured light across the walls, cold and sharp. "You knew," he said. He turned to face her. "All this time. You knew Clara was alive." Eleanor closed the door with a soft click. She moved to the sitting room and lowered herself into a high-backed chair near the window. She did not invite him to sit. "Yes." The single word hung between them. "You faked her death," Richard said. His voice was steady, but his hands were not. "You forged a death certificate. You arranged a funeral for an empty casket. You made me believe my wife was gone." "I protected you." Eleanor's voice was calm, measured, the same tone she used when discussing stock prices or charitable donations. "That woman was not suitable. She came from nothing. She would have dragged you down, damaged the family reputation. I did what any mother would do." Richard's hands curled into fists at his sides. "She was pregnant." "I know. With my child." "I know that too." The casualness of it made his stomach turn. He took a step closer to her chair. "You've known for 8 years that I have a daughter. You watched me grieve. You watched me bury myself in work because I thought I'd lost everything. And you said nothing." Eleanor's expression did not change. Not a flicker of guilt, not a shadow of doubt. "The child is unfortunate, but she's better off where she is, away from this family, away from expectations she could never meet." Richard stared at his mother. For the first time in his life, he did not see the woman who had raised him. He saw a stranger wearing her face. "Better off," his voice rose. "They've been living in poverty. Clara cleaned houses to feed your granddaughter. Lily almost died from pneumonia because they couldn't afford a doctor. That's what you call better off. Temporary hardship builds character." Richard felt something shift inside him, something that had been holding his anger in check for 38 years. "The letters," he said. 53 letters. Clara wrote them to me. You returned every single one." Eleanor's chin lifted slightly. "She was persistent. I'll give her that much. You wrote, 'refused by recipient.' You made her believe I didn't want her, that I didn't want my own daughter, because you didn't need them." Eleanor's voice sharpened now, an edge of steel beneath the silk. "You moved on. You built your company. You became successful. None of that would have happened if you'd been chained to a woman who brought nothing to the table except a swollen belly." Richard's jaw ached from clenching. You don't get to decide that. You never had that right. I had every right. I'm your mother. No. Richard stepped back. A mother doesn't destroy her son's family. A mother doesn't condemn her own grandchild to poverty. A mother doesn't lie for 8 years and call it protection. Eleanor's face flickered, just for a moment. Something that might have been surprise, or perhaps recognition that the conversation had moved beyond her control. You'll thank me someday, she said, when your emotions settle, when you think clearly about what I saved you from. I have a daughter. Richard's voice cracked. A little girl who grew up thinking her father abandoned her, who asked her mother today if I was going to make her cry. Do you understand what you've done? Eleanor said nothing. Richard looked around the room, the antique furniture, the oil paintings in gilded frames, the crystal decanters filled with scotch that cost more per bottle than Clara's monthly grocery bills, his entire childhood, wrapped in money and presented as love. You didn't protect me, he said quietly. You controlled me. And I let you. For 38 years. I just let you do it. He turned toward the door. Richard. His mother's voice followed him, sharp now. If you walk out that door, if you choose that woman and her child over your own family, they are my family. He stopped, but did not turn around. You just made sure I didn't know it until today. He walked out into the afternoon light. The sun was lower now, the shadows stretching long across the manicured lawn. He checked his watch, 2:53 p.m., 2 hours until the buyer arrived, 2 hours to decide what kind of man he was going to be. The drive back took almost 2 hours. Traffic, an accident on the highway. Richard did not turn on the radio, he did not call his lawyer, he just sat behind the wheel, gripping it until his knuckles went white, and somewhere between his mother's house and the old house, something inside him broke open. He had believed her for 8 years. He had believed every word his mother told him without once asking a question, without once looking for proof. Clara was dead, and he had accepted it because accepting it was easier than fighting. He had been a coward, a comfortable, wealthy coward. Richard pulled into the driveway at 4:47 p.m. A silver Lexus was already parked there. The buyer had arrived early. His shirt was damp with sweat, sticking to his back. His tie felt like a rope around his throat. Through the windshield, he could see the front door of the old house standing open, inside. Voices. His lawyer's measured tone. A deeper voice, the buyer. Richard got out of the car. His legs felt unsteady, like they might fold beneath him. He walked through the front door and stopped. The living room had been transformed. His lawyer, Patterson, stood near the coffee table with documents spread across its surface. The buyer, a heavy-set man in his 60s with silver hair and an expensive charcoal suit, sat on the worn sofa, pen already in hand, and by the staircase, Clara and Lily. They had packed. A single, battered suitcase sat at Clara's feet. A faded canvas bag hung from her shoulder. Lily clutched her old teddy bear against her chest, its fur worn thin from years of holding. They were ready to leave, ready to be thrown out of the only home they had. Richard's throat tightened until he could barely breathe. Mr. Hale." The buyer looked up with a practiced smile. "We were starting to wonder if you'd make it. Traffic." Richard did not answer. He was looking at Lily, at the way she pressed herself against her mother's side, at the teddy bear she held like it was the only thing in the world she trusted. "The documents are ready," Patterson said. He gestured toward the table, his voice professionally cheerful. "Just need your signature on pages 3, 7, and 12. Then the wire transfer processes, and we're all done here." Done. The word echoed in Richard's skull. He walked to the table, looked down at the contract. His name was already printed at the bottom of each signature line. $2.3 million. That was the price of this house, the price of throwing Clara and Lily onto the street. He picked up the pen. Clara did not move. She did not beg or argue or plead. She simply stood there, one hand on Lily's shoulder, her face carefully blank, like she had already accepted what was coming, like she had spent 8 years learning not to hope for anything from him. Richard looked at the contract again, at the neat paragraphs of legal language, at the line waiting for his signature. He thought about the letters, 53 of them. Every one returned. He thought about his mother's voice. "You'll thank me someday." He thought about Lily's question from this morning, "Is that man going to make you cry?" His hand trembled. A drop of sweat fell from his forehead onto the page, smearing the ink. "Mr. Hale!" The buyer's smile was fading. "Is there a problem?" Richard set the pen down. "Yes," he said. His voice came out rough, barely recognizable as his own. "There's a problem." Patterson's eyebrows rose. "Richard, we've been through all of this. The terms are extremely favorable. Mr. Morrison has been more than patient. The deal is off." Silence. The buyer's face went from confused to red in 2 seconds. "Excuse me? I said the deal is off." Richard pushed the contract away from him. "I'm not selling this house. You can't do that." Morrison stood up, his voice rising. "We have a signed letter of intent. I've arranged financing. My wife has already—" "I'll cover your expenses." Richard reached into his jacket and pulled out his checkbook. His hands were shaking, but he wrote anyway. "Whatever you've spent on inspections, legal fees, due diligence, all of it." He tore off the check. $50,000. He held it out. Morrison stared at the check like it was an insult. "This is absurd. I'll sue. I'll drag you through court for breach of contract." "Then sue me." Richard's voice was steady now. Something had settled inside him. "My lawyer will handle it. But this house is not for sale. Not today. Not ever." Patterson stepped forward, his face pale. "Richard, think about what you're doing. The penalty clauses alone could cost you— I know what I'm doing. David." He turned to look at Clara. She had not moved, but her hand on Lily's shoulder had tightened, and her carefully blank expression had cracked. Just a little, just enough to show something underneath. "Get out," Richard said to Morrison. His voice was quiet, but left no room for argument. "Take the check. Take your lawyer. Get out of my house." Morrison snatched the check from Richard's hand. His face twisted with fury. "You'll regret this. Hale, I promise you that." He stormed toward the door. Patterson gathered the unsigned documents into his briefcase, shot Richard one last incredulous look, and followed. The door slammed behind them. The house fell silent. Just the 3 of them now, Richard, Clara, and the little girl with his eyes who had never known her father existed. Clara stared at him. Her voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper. "What did you just do?" Richard looked at her, at Lily, still clutching her bear, at the suitcase packed and ready by the door. "What I should have done 8 years ago," he said. "I stopped choosing what was easy." Clara stood perfectly still for a long moment. Then she reached down and picked up the suitcase. She set it aside, against the wall. "This isn't over," she said quietly. "You know that. Canceling one sale doesn't erase 8 years. It doesn't make Lily trust you. It doesn't make me trust you. I know. This is just the beginning. The hard part hasn't even started." Richard nodded. His legs felt weak. His hands were still trembling. He had just thrown away more than $2 million, and whatever relationship remained with his mother, and Clara was right, none of it was enough. Not yet. "I know," he said again. But I'm not leaving. Not this time. Night came slowly to the old house. Clara took Lily upstairs after a quiet dinner, rice and vegetables. Simple and plain. Richard watched the meat from across the table but could not bring himself to touch his own plate. His stomach had been knotted since he walked out of his mother's house. Now he sat alone in the living room. The lights were off. He had not bothered to turn them on, The darkness felt right, honest. Through the window, moonlight fell in pale squares across the wooden floor. The house creaked and settled around him. The sounds of old wood and older memories. He had proposed to Clara in this room, 11 years ago. She had cried and laughed at the same time, and he had thought he understood what happiness meant. He had been wrong about so many things. Richard leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and pressed his palms against his eyes until he saw spots. He had built companies, closed deals worth tens of millions, sat across from executives and lawyers and never flinched. And now he sat in a dark room, unable to face a 7-year-old girl who weighed less than his briefcase. What kind of man did that make him? Footsteps on the stairs, light, careful. Richard did not move. He assumed it was Clara, coming to tell him where he could sleep, or to tell him to leave. He would not blame her for either. But the footsteps stopped at the bottom of the staircase. He looked up. Lily stood there in worn pajamas with small flowers on them, her teddy bear hanging from one hand. Her feet were bare on the cold floor. She was looking at him with those eyes, his eyes, and for a moment he forgot how to breathe. "Why are you sitting in the dark?" she asked. Richard's throat locked. He swallowed. "I don't know. I guess I didn't feel like turning on the lights." Lily considered this. She took a step closer, then another. She stopped about 5 feet away from him, still holding the bear by one worn paw. "Mama said you're staying." "Yes? She said you used to live here, before I was born." "That's right." Lily tilted her head slightly, studying him the way children study things they don't quite understand. "Are you my father?" The question hit him somewhere deep, in a place he didn't know still existed. He had known it was coming, had dreaded it since the moment he saw her on the stairs this morning. But hearing it from her mouth, in her small voice, in this dark room, it was different. Worse. "Yes," he said. The word came out cracked, broken in the middle. "I am." Lily did not react. She just stood there, processing. Her fingers tightened on the teddy bear's paw. "Then why did you leave us?" Richard opened his mouth, closed it. What could he say? That he had been lied to, that his own mother had orchestrated everything, that he had believed Clara was dead because believing it was easier than questioning it. None of it was good enough. None of it would make sense to a 7-year-old who had grown up without a father, who had watched her mother cry through the walls at night, who had learned to ask if strange men would make Mama cry because that was her reality. "I made a mistake," he said finally. His voice sounded thin, pathetic even to his own ears. "A very bad mistake. I believed something that wasn't true. And because I believed it, I wasn't there for you, or for your mother." "What did you believe?" Richard's chest ached. Every breath hurt. "I believed your mother was gone, that she had died. Someone told me that. And I believed them without checking, without looking for proof, without asking questions. Who told you?" "My mother." Lily's brow furrowed, confusion mixed with something else. "Your mama lied to you?" "Yes." "Why?" Richard had no answer, not one that a child could understand, not one that he could understand himself. Even now, "I don't know," he said. "I've been asking myself that all day. I still don't have an answer that makes sense." Lily stood in silence for a long moment. The teddy bear dangled from her fingers, its worn nose nearly touching the floor. Somewhere outside, a dog barked once and fell silent. "Did you love Mama?" she asked. Before you thought she was gone? Yes. No hesitation. Very much. Did you love me? The question cracked something open inside him, something that had been sealed shut for 8 years. I didn't know you existed, he said. His voice was barely a whisper now. No one told me. If I had known, if anyone had told me you were real, I would have come. I would have found you both. I would have never let you grow up alone. Never. Lily's face was unreadable in the dim light. She looked at him the way children look at puzzles they cannot solve, problems too big for small hands. Mama cried a lot, she said quietly. At night, when she thought I was sleeping, I could hear her through the wall. Richard's eyes burned. He blinked hard, but it didn't help. I'm sorry, he said. I'm so sorry, Lily. I know that doesn't fix anything. I know it doesn't give you back the years. But I am sorry for all of it. Lily did not respond right away. She stood there, small and still in the moonlight, and Richard waited for her to turn and walk away, to go back upstairs and leave him alone in the dark where he deserved to be. But she did not leave. Instead, she took 3 more steps forward. Slow, careful, testing. Then she sat down on the floor, about 2 feet away from him. She set her teddy bear in her lap and looked at the squares of moonlight on the floorboards. Richard did not move, did not speak. He barely breathed. They sat together in the darkness, father and daughter, strangers who shared the same eyes. The house creaked around them. The moon moved slowly across the sky outside. Lily did not call him Dad. She did not reach for his hand. She did not say she forgave him. But she stayed. And for the first time since this morning, Richard felt something loosen in his chest. Not hope, exactly, not relief, just the smallest crack in the wall between them. Lily looked up at him, her face serious. If you make Mama cry again, she said quietly, I won't talk to you anymore. Ever. 3 weeks passed. Richard learned where the cleaning supplies were kept under the kitchen sink, in a plastic bucket Clara had probably owned for years. He learned which floorboard on the 3rd step creaked the loudest and how to avoid it when coming downstairs early. He learned that Lily liked her eggs scrambled with a little cheese melted on top, and that Clara still drank her coffee black. No sugar, the same way she had 11 years ago. He did not sleep in the master bedroom. He took the small room at the end of the hall, the one that had been used for storage when he lived here before. It had a narrow bed that was too short for him and a window that faced the backyard. It was enough. Every morning, he woke before dawn. He made breakfast nothing complicated, just oatmeal or eggs or toast with butter. He set the table for 3, then he waited, some mornings. Clara came down first. She would nod at him, take her coffee, and sit at the table without speaking. Other mornings, Lily appeared first, her hair tangled from sleep, her teddy bear still tucked under one arm. Richard did not push. He did not ask for forgiveness or try to explain himself again. He simply showed up. Every day, every meal, every small moment he had missed for 7 years. He fixed the leaky faucet in the bathroom that had been dripping for months. He patched the crack in the living room ceiling where water had seeped through last winter. He replaced the broken hinge on the back door that made it stick every time someone tried to open it. These were things he had never done before. His hands had always held contracts and pens. Not wrenches and hammers, but he learned. He watched videos on his phone. He made mistakes. He tried again. Clara watched him. She did not comment on the repairs or the breakfasts or the way he folded his own laundry now, hanging his shirts in the small closet of the storage room. But she watched. One afternoon, she was standing at the sink washing dishes. Richard came into the kitchen to put away the broom he had been using to sweep the back porch. He moved toward the counter, meaning to help with the drying. Clara did not step aside, but she did not tell him to leave either. "You know," she said, her eyes still on the plate in her hands. "You didn't lose us." Richard stopped. "You didn't lose us," Claire repeated. She rinsed the plate and set it in the drying rack. "You gave us up. There's a difference." The words landed heavy in his chest. Richard stood still, the broom forgotten in his hand. "I know," he said quietly. "Do you—" She turned off the water and dried her hands on a towel, then turned to face him. Her eyes were steady, not angry, not sad, just clear. "Because losing something means it was taken from you. Giving something up means you let it go. You stopped holding on." Richard set the broom against the wall. "I believed what I was told. I didn't question it. I didn't fight for it." He paused. "You're right. I gave up. On you. On everything we had." Clara was quiet for a moment. Then she reached for the dish towel hanging by the sink and held it out to him. Richard took it. Their fingers brushed just barely, just for a second. She turned back to the sink and started on the next plate. He stood beside her and began drying the dishes she had already washed. They worked in silence, side by side. The water ran. The plates clinked softly against each other. Outside the window, the afternoon light slanted golden through the old oak tree in the backyard, the one that had been there since before Richard was born. It was not forgiveness. It was not reconciliation. It was just two people standing in a kitchen, doing a simple task together, learning how to exist in the same space again. But it was something. The next morning, Richard woke early as usual. He went downstairs and started breakfast. Oatmeal with honey. Lily's favorite. He had learned. He heard footsteps on the stairs. Lily appeared in the kitchen doorway, still in her pajamas, rubbing sleep from her eyes. She looked at the pot on the stove, then at Richard. "Oatmeal," she asked. "With honey." She walked to the table and climbed into her chair. Richard brought her the bowl and set it in front of her, along with a spoon. She picked up the spoon, scooped up a bite, and put it in her mouth. Richard poured himself a cup of coffee and sat down across from her. The kitchen was quiet. Morning light came through the window above the sink, falling across the table in warm, golden rectangles. The old house settled around them with its familiar creaks and sighs. Lily ate her oatmeal. Richard drank his coffee. Neither of them spoke. But Lily did not turn away from him. She did not take her bowl to another room. She sat at the table. In the morning light, 3 feet away from the father she was still learning to know. Richard looked at her at the curve of her cheek, the way she held her spoon in her small fist, the messy hair falling across her forehead. His daughter, 7 years old. A stranger and a gift he did not deserve. He did not know what the future held. He did not know if Clara would ever fully trust him again, or if Lily would ever call him Dad. He did not know how to repair 8 years of absence, or if such a thing was even possible, but he knew this: he was here, in this kitchen, at this table, on this ordinary morning. For the first time in 8 years, he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Lily finished her oatmeal and looked up at him. His eyes studied his face for a moment. "Can I have more honey?" she asked. Richard felt something shift in his chest, something small and warm that he had not felt in a very long time. "Yes," he said, "you can have more honey." He got up from the table and went to the cabinet where Clara kept the honey jar. He brought it back and set it in front of Lily, watching as she drizzled more onto her oatmeal with serious concentration. Outside, a bird began to sing in the oak tree. The morning stretched out ahead of them, unhurried and ordinary. Richard sat back down and wrapped his hands around his coffee cup, feeling its warmth seep into his palms. He was not forgiven. He was not trusted. He was not called Dad. But he was here. And for now, that was enough. Some stories leave us sitting quietly for a while. This one might have done that. There is something heavy about watching a man realize he believed a lie for 8 years. Something tender about a little girl who sits on the floor in the dark with a stranger who happens to be her father. These feelings do not wrap up neatly. They are not supposed to. Many of us know what it is to carry something we never asked to carry, to love someone who could not find us, to wait for a door to open year after year until we stopped expecting it would. Some of us have been the ones who left. Some of us have been the ones who stayed behind, wondering. It does not need to make sense right now. Not everything requires an ending. Some things are allowed to simply sit with us, unfinished, the way real life often is. Thank you for staying until the last word. Thank you for listening.